Great. So, oh
Sweta.
Oh, yeah. Hi, Sweta.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Got your
Good. Hi.
new headphones? Yeah.
I did. I'm trying them out today. I'm excited. Hey, John. Hi, Laura. How are you?
So we can see if anyone else joins throughout, but can go ahead and get started. And so Sweta and Laura, I'm glad you know each other. And Laura was saying that you have some familiarity and have done assignments like this before. So, so that's great, but we'll go through the whole spiel for the sake of the recording, and we'll be following up with faculty afterwards individually to sort of see what kind of scope and support folks have in mind. So I'll go ahead and share my screen. And go ahead and present. Loading, there we go. So it turns out that Britt wasn't able to join us today, but she's also supporting this project, and we have John here from the museum, so thank you for being here too. And this is an info session about if you want to incorporate a Wikipedia editing assignment into your class. Here are some ways that the library and the museum can support, and sort of things that you need to have in mind if you're going to do an assignment like this. But feel free to stop and ask questions along the way, or share your ideas and your experiences, Laura, from having done this in the past. So our ideas behind the purpose of this project were that it's a great pedagogical opportunity in terms of getting students excited about their research projects, which we as librarians are always interested in, and really, and then being able to share their knowledge with the world, showing them that the knowledge that they're learning in their classes isn't just for themselves, but can have broader sort of impacts beyond their own learning. Also, the idea of inclusion, that there is a limitation to the diversity of content on Wikipedia, and that it could, this project, by having our diverse student body contributing to content on Wikipedia, and also specifically choosing, for instance, women of color as subject for content to be added to Wikipedia, there's a way to broaden inclusion here, and also to highlight relevant museum collections that that do feature folks that may have come from communities that have been marginalized maybe by artistic communities and scholarship in the past. Critical studies. It allows us to introduce themes of feminism in art and art history, and open access to information. There's an information literacy component here in terms of deepening students' understanding of authority, writing for an audience, finding credible sources, citing their sources. And then in doing so, it really teaches them lifelong learning skills, and also marketable skills. So things that they might be able to throw on their resume, and also hopefully they get excited about contributing to Wikipedia and continue doing so through the rest of their lives. And really, this project can be adapted to any course learning outcomes. So whatever your learning outcomes are, there's probably a way to connect it into a Wikipedia project. So there are a variety of options of what you can do with Wikipedia. There's going from like the least amount of prep time in class time to maybe the most amount. So if you, or let's start with the most amount actually on the right-hand side. So the real like full-fledged Wikipedia in education assignment, they recommend making it at least a 6-week assignment. That you need to have your students learn about Wikipedia's policies, the mechanics of how to edit Wikipedia. They need to choose a page to edit or create and do pretty extensive background research. You may want to have them sort of write a paper on their own and then figure out how to add it to Wikipedia, or start with a Wikipedia page and really critique it first. You may have some in-class sessions in which students sort of start making edits. In class, you might also want to allot some time for peer review. So there are ways that students can sort of like draft their writing in a sandbox and then have a peer review process through that. And a really cool thing is if you develop an assignment through Wikipedia for Education or Wiki for Education, you can actually have this sort of like learning management system platform within Wikipedia, basically, where students can do their edits. You can see all the edits and changes that they've made and grade their contributions, and everything that they've done and the peer editing they've done for each other is all tracked on this one dashboard. So it's really fancy and nice, but takes some work to set up. And actually Wikipedia is anticipating a huge load on their system this fall, as lots of faculty decide this is a great opportunity for online classes. And so for the first time ever, they've actually put a deadline on when you can make it. Well, so first they've made an application that you have to fill out if you want to do the full Wikipedia in Education assignment using their platform. And they've said their deadline for applying is Sunday, this Sunday. So it's coming up very fast. I was just sort of poking around their site and was like, what's this? Like, I've never seen a deadline before. But they say they need to, their staff actually provides a lot of support for this assignment process. And so they want to make sure that they are able to adequately support. And so that's why they're doing this application process and a deadline that's pretty soon. So that sort of is that like have you done an assignment, Laura, before that's been like that?
I have not actually done an assignment with a group of students.
Okay, you've just worked on it. Okay, great. So that is sort of one way to do it. And you can just Google like Wiki-edu dashboard and see like a screenshot of sort of what that whole dashboard platform looks like. But that's for folks that really want to base kind of your entire course, or at least half of it, around editing Wikipedia. A smaller or like more manageable approach might be an edit-a-thon. So that might be developing some homework assignments for students to just learn about Wikipedia policies, learn how to edit. They'll need to take some time to choose which page they're going to edit and do some background research, but maybe it's as little as you just require each student to make one sentence of edits, or to add one citation, or maybe in class together, we all work on a sentence as a class or something like that and do it sort of live, and everyone can kind of contribute and find research that backs it up. So having an edit-a-thon would be, instead of working on something over, say, an entire semester, you could just have it be one class period, basically, where, okay, we make one edit. Now you kind of know how Wikipedia works. You see, we've taken some time before class to read into some of the issues with Wikipedia editing, and maybe issues of bias in terms of who edits the content or things like that. And then in terms of grading, you might just need to grade based on participation or some kind of written reflection, or students could submit like a draft of the edit that they were going to make, or a screenshot of the edit they made. But often these edits will get sort of rolled back by a Wikipedia editor if they don't think your contribution was notable enough or lacked sufficient citation or something like that. So you do need students to really document what they did on the page, because it could disappear. Then the least, it's probably a similar amount of prep and class time, but you don't need the maybe technical side of things. You don't need to teach students how to actually edit Wikipedia. You could just do a Wikipedia critique. So maybe they read about Wikipedia, how these pages get created and edited, what the policies are, and maybe they read some studies on the accuracy and the editing community behind Wikipedia. And maybe this could be tied into other sort of critical studies content in a class. And then in class, maybe you practice critiquing a Wikipedia page together. Who's included here? Who's not included? Is there any bias in how this person's works are talked about? What is, what else would you include? What other research can you do to see what's missing from this page? And then maybe their homework is just an essay critiquing that a new Wikipedia page that they find. It could be individual group work or group work. And it could be informed by students' own research on the topic and maybe a feminist analysis of a particular page. So there's a variety of of approaches you can take to this. Laura, do you have any ideas at this point about how much time you have to spend or what kind of scope you were envisioning for this project for you?
Yeah, I'm teaching the perfect class for this. So I'm very excited to fold it in. I can't do a 6-week project because I already have so much content and assignments I'm trying to fold in. But I'm planning to do, like, out of your 3 categories here, an edit-a-thon assignment. So I'd like to dedicate a class time to going through what you've listed as like prep, and then fold it into research that each student's already going to be doing on a female artist or minority artist, and make that part of the assignment as well as a presentation they're going to be doing. Yeah.
Yeah, that I think that sounds like definitely a good scope. Yeah, so I think the next slide goes into more detail about that full-fledged Wikipedia assignment where you actually have to apply by this Sunday. And the dashboard support is really pretty extensive. So you've got, you can track to make sure that the students complete the tutorials about how to edit Wikipedia and their policies and stuff beforehand. It tracks all the student edits. There's troubleshooting, help from staff, and you can even see at the end really like all the work that your class together did for Wikipedia. It's pretty neat. You can also approve topics and support student research and like comment on students' contributions in this platform. But if you're not using that platform, then there's still some responsibilities to keep in mind. So first of all, thinking about what are your learning outcomes in terms of the Wikipedia side of things, and then determining a scope based on that. So and then also how much in-class and out-of-class time you can dedicate is is a factor in that too. Then figuring out what kind of assignment meets these learning outcomes and the amount of time I have to spend. And then you'll of course want to think about how that looks on your syllabus, how many class sessions to allot, where to sort of slot in time for the homework that it might take students to do the prep work if they're doing some of it at home or on their own time. And think about how you're going to like assign points for different things. What if you want to come up with a sort of rubric to grade student work, or if it's just going to be participation based or something like that. That's something to decide on. And then, of course, touching base with the library and the museum. The library, of course, has ample collections on art and feminism and whatever your course topic probably is. And so we can definitely help put together some resources for you, and you'll want to touch base probably with your subject librarian. In this case, of course, Sweta is the subject librarian for art. And but other folks that are watching this recording later, you have a librarian for your subject or your department. And so you can touch base with them, and we could create a library guide, a research guide to good sources of research in your discipline. And then the museum can work with you to tie in their collections as well. And we'll get to that more in a second. But thinking about just touching base with us as you develop this assignment to make sure that we do have collections that can support it, and seeing if your students can get more out of this assignment by discovering how the St. Mary's resources can contribute both to their learning and also how they can contribute, highlighting our resources to the broader Wikipedia audience. During the term, you'll want to, make sure all the readings, the tutorials, the things you want your students to do as prep work is available through Moodle. And if there's readings that are available through the library's collections, even if students are taking class online, we can use e-reserves to help make those readings available in Moodle. You'll want to, break students into groups. If you're going to do group work, set aside the class and homework time, communicate with us, as I mentioned before. And then here's the sort of like Wikipedia stuff that you'll want to consider. So Wikipedia has a limit of how many new editing registrations they can take from a single IP address range on a particular day. So you can't have all 20 of your students, if they're living on campus, or taking class on campus, all register at the same time. Might have to spread that out in advance. And you can also, there's probably some technical support that's needed in terms of getting students to be able to use Wikipedia. I can help with that, and some of my colleagues can as well. But they may come to you as well for help with, I couldn't figure out how to save it, or I can't figure out how to add my citation here, or something like that. And it's up to you how much tech support you really want to provide with that. Facilitating peer review is probably a good thing to think about too, because Wikipedia seems to have a lot of concerns about groups of students just going in and all messing with Wikipedia and adding content. It can create a lot of work for their editors to sort of to check everyone's edits. So any work you can do to have students review each other's work beforehand can be helpful to Wikipedia. And to your students, I think, hopefully. And hi there, thanks for joining. And we're recording the session, so we can, and we'll be sure to share out anything that you missed afterwards. And then also providing, some kind of feedback or grading on student work if you want to do that is something to plan out as well, obviously. What are your students' responsibilities? So learning both the policies and the sort of technical procedures of editing Wikipedia. It's pretty easy to edit Wikipedia, but there's some things that may be confusing to some students if they haven't operated in a content management system sort of editing platform before. Your students, depending on your course learning outcomes, maybe you want to spend some time making sure that they are aware of how race, gender, and other identities factor into Wikipedia and the edits that are made and the content that's available on there. And especially for the art and feminism side of things, thinking about how gender plays into this especially is a key learning outcome. They'll need to choose a Wikipedia page to edit, but the library and the museum can help you maybe choose relevant pages for them to edit. At this stage, for beginning editors, it's usually recommended that they don't write their own page from scratch, but instead just start with editing a page that already exists. And then, of course, they need to find whatever research they're going to add to Wikipedia. Maybe it's just a citation. Maybe it is a whole series of paragraphs on a topic. They need to, of course, write it up in sort of a Wikipedia style, and then add it to some kind of platform for peer review. Maybe you just use Google Docs, or you can use the sandboxes on Wikipedia. And making sure that when they edit to Wikipedia, they do so in the prescribed format, including citations. And there's also a pretty cool opportunity that often you can have conversations with the other folks that have edited a page over Wikipedia's sort of talk pages. So if you especially are editing a page that has a lot of people sort of working on it, you can submit questions about things that you're thinking about adding, or engage in dialogue about the things that they've added in the past. Maybe if you're going to delete someone's edition because you found it's incorrect, you want to let them know about it in the talk page. And then, of course, they need to, anything that's going to be graded, they'll need to think about how to save that and submit it at the end. So that's a lot of responsibilities for both you and your students. So I'll talk a little bit about how the library can support this project, and John can talk a little bit about how the museum can support this project. So often when I'm saying librarians, I'm meaning me definitely, and I can also, depending on, you know, how many classes decide to take us up on this, some of my colleagues have offered to help with some things as well. But so in some cases, it may be your subject librarian helping you. In other cases, it may be me, as I'm the librarian for English, but I can also work with other disciplines in terms of the Wikipedia side of things. So we can help provide, you know, link you to the instructions that are already online in many places about how to actually make edits to Wikipedia. We can also help you choose readings about Wikipedia and gender bias, or Wikipedia and whatever your sort of topic of focus is, to get students thinking about the role of Wikipedia and their role as editors on Wikipedia, and bring in some of maybe that critical theory and feminist theory that can inform how we think about Wikipedia and the content that it does or doesn't contain. I can help you in setting up your students to edit Wikipedia, making sure they get registered, all of that stuff. And then your subject librarian is probably the best person to help you find relevant research in library collections. And then the actual like editing process of Wikipedia would probably be me and any of my other colleagues that happen to be comfortable with it. We can help your students with the more technical side of things, both either jumping into your Zoom session in class as they do their editing, or providing some asynchronous help. You know, students can email us, or or we could, you know, record a quick tutorial or something like that if needed. And John.
Thank you, Gina. So the museum would love to help support, and we can do a number of things working in concert with the library. Obviously, the museum has a large permanent collection full of artwork and objects to be explored. Currently, we have an exhibit called Feminizing Permanence on display in a museum that's not open right now, but the exhibit is still there, and we have a good digital presence. It features 40 artworks from 40 women artists in our permanent collection. We would love to see research focused there or in other places. We have, along with Gina's kind of scale in terms of work and responsibilities, I can see the museum working with any faculty member directly for some sort of custom assignment or collaboration. But some things that Britt and I thought of just off the top of our head, the Museum of Art would love to have 40 entries for the 40 women in feminizing permanence. Some of their Wikipedia status is non-existent or very sparse. Likewise, we would love if the Museum of Art could be featured in any Wikipedia of any artist of those 40 or otherwise in our permanent collection, adding exposure for the museum and putting the correct information using our exhibit resources and in our longtime archives for specific artists. And then there's a couple other ways that we could work together. For example, down here at the bottom of our slide, the Cape Dorset artists, a large art colony in very northern Canada, very famous stone cut artwork. They're a very famous group, and we have a number of pieces in our collection. The exposure, there's just enough kind of sweet spot where you have a good amount of scholarship, but still plenty to put online on Wikipedia. And we can see working with faculty members or students and their research interests to find something and pair them up, provide the first steps, and then work with Gina or Sweta, the subject librarians, to get more resources online. But really, yeah, just like the library, the museum is ready and willing to kind of work with you to see what things you're working on as a professor, or what your individual students want to work on, and then find something that kind of fits. Thank you, Gina.
Originally, of course, when we thought this up, we thought we would be doing it in person. They'd be able to like engage with the art, you know, that's on the walls, and then translate it to online and sort of spread the knowledge worldwide. But we're happy to you know, we'll have
yeah, well, we're going to have closer lookings on Zoom, and lots of rotating cameras, and probably like my hands, just so people can remember what it's like to like grab things and look at objects closely. But yeah, we're willing to work in this challenging environment in many innovative ways.
Yeah. Oh, Doodle link, huh? Well, forgot to add that. I'll be sending out a Doodle link afterwards to book a follow-up consultation with us to talk about how we can support your course in particular, and solidify some details for your syllabus about when students will be doing this, and then we can sort of put it on our calendars too, in terms of when we need to make ourselves available for helping you and your students actually go in and do the research and then do the editing on Wikipedia. So consider your learning outcomes, the scope of the project you have in mind, and we'd love to converse with you after this. We can do, you know, the idea with the Doodle link was doing another sort of private Zoom meeting with each faculty member that's interested in pursuing a project, either this fall, or I know some folks had expressed interest in Jan term as well. And once we sort of get the framework for this going this fall, it's quite possible that we, you know, once we see how much bandwidth it takes, that we might be able to support it in the spring or other semesters going forward too. So for anyone who is intimidated by the amount of work it'll take to launch this in the fall, like, keep in conversation with us. And this is really a good project for any semester, whether your students are online or in person. So I also, just have another note about that July 26th deadline for the Wikipedia education dashboard. And basically, yeah, if you're just doing that full assignment using their dashboard where you can track student edits and all of that, you apply by July 26th, and then they'll notify you by August 7th if you can indeed go through them for a project. Of course, you're still able to run a Wikipedia editing assignment yourself. You just won't have that support of the Wikipedia and education staff, and you won't have their platform that you can use to track edits and that sort of thing. And then I'll share out these slides as well, and they've got some resources at the end for art and feminism. Actually recognize that this remote learning semester might be a good time for Wikipedia project, and so they've also put together a remote learning guide. Wikipedia or Wiki-EDU has a lovely training that instructors can go through, and then a separate one that students can go through that's all about, you know, assignment design and editing Wikipedia and all the things to keep in mind. And then Wikipedia has a nice sort of Wikipedia page about how to run an edit-a-thon. So we will be going through all that with you. Any questions at this point?
Gina, did you have any faculty express interest in doing the full Wikipedia, like 6 weeks assignment?
We haven't heard that yet. I think a lot of folks were just kind of curious at this point about how all we have was the initial interest survey that we sent out, and so we didn't ask at that point sort of how much how much they're willing to do. I think our conversations that we have with them one-on-one, now that they maybe know more about what that requires, will let us know what they have in mind. I was thinking more of the edit-a-thon type scope when I originally came up with this, but then I saw that Wiki-EDU does have so many resources for doing a longer term project, and that they really kind of say that for the best student experience, to really get what editing Wikipedia is about, devoting at least 6 weeks is good for that. But I know that there are always these one-off edit-a-thons that happen all around the world successfully, and so if those folks can do it, I think, you know, we can do that too. So yeah, no idea about the scope yet, but we look forward to talking to faculty and finding out what they have in mind.
Okay, cool.
I'm assuming that if we haven't really had conversations yet with anyone, if they had wanted to do, like, devote half of their fall class to this, we probably would
Yeah.
have heard from them already.
Yeah, makes sense.
Hi, Jody.
I'll speak for me as a
Yeah.
faculty member. I think the 6-week one makes it more interesting for me, because then I can design a course around that. But then I have a separate agenda. I don't necessarily want to use the museum collection as a way to design the experiments. Me and my colleagues in the Western Academy of Management and the International Humanistic Management Association have been working on research that collectively has a body of work that's not represented as sort of the new research. And I would want that to be the new content created, because transferring what's in the library and what's already been researched is, from my perspective, in management, especially the old canon. And if we're reinventing the world and reinventing ways of doing things, each one of us is doing it separately, and we're curating it ourselves, which is a lot of work for faculty. But if we could engage the students with that as they read and do the assignments to make it available for reuse, that's what would make it interesting for me.
Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting to hear. And yeah, whatever you choose to do doesn't necessarily have to involve the museum. We did advertise that, you know, we're willing to adapt this to any kind of course focus. And I think the sort of information literacy and other benefits are applicable to whatever the area of focus. I will say that Wikipedia, one of their policies, or sort of their guidelines about their content, is that they are not a place to share original research. Everything has to cite something else that's already been, like, published somewhere. But that doesn't mean, yeah, as long as, you know, it sounds like the folks in your organizations have been writing extensively and doing the research, and so then just highlighting it on Wikipedia is a perfectly appropriate research.
So let me explain a little more if there's time for that. I don't know how much time we have, but
yeah, we had booked the hour, so.
okay, so it's all professors who are peer-reviewed journal publications, so it's all building on existing work.
Perfect.
But what it's doing is it's combining things. So my particular interest is using the arts to humanize management. Mm-hmm. So when I'm teaching it on campus, I actually walk the students to the museum and have them look at the images and pick the one that speaks to them. And then use that as a reflective exercise to come back and think about vision and strategy. Mm-hmm. And what that speaks to them, and what their own values are, and what that piece of art represents to them and means to them. So bringing together the individual and the inner voice through interaction with the art to what they show up in the world as, and what they want to be participating in a larger community or group as their vision for that group or that world or that project. They do real life projects of building projects. So I want to combine existing canons of work mm-hmm. and put them into practice. So it's never original research in that respect, okay. But it's putting existing research to practice in new and innovative ways.
Yeah, and that's great. Yeah, and as you look more into sort of the guidelines that Wikipedia provides for what kinds of content you can add, I think that you can find ways to have your students sort of highlight that and adapt it to content on Wikipedia.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions or thoughts that either John or Sweta you have from the library or museum perspective?
I have a couple personal questions when we're done recording. It's not probably relevant to anyone else.
Yeah, sure. You can, if there's no generally applicable questions, I will